In the latest installment of our Gotei 13 series, we're going to be diving deep into the very heart and soul of the Gotei itself as we take a look at the 9th Division, which is currently being headed up by its Army Drill Sergeant-style captain Kensei Muguruma, and of course its ever-popular everyman Shinigami vice-captain Shuhei Hisagi. And I'm pretty sure I've even heard word of there being a super vice-captain in this division as well, although that doesn't sound too orthodox to me. But as with all of our Gotei 13 series videos, there will be spoilers for the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach. So the 9th Division is the latest in an increasingly long line of divisions that don't really have anything to do with or play a particularly big role in the overarching mainline story of Bleach. Yet there's something oddly compelling about these guys, oddly commendable. That sounds like a weird word to use, but I honestly think it fits here. I really appreciate their go-getter nature, their drive to keep going even in the face of insurmountable odds that might have crushed any other division. And I think a lot of that arresting emotion and that drive to keep going really rests on the shoulders of its vice-captain Hisagi, who ended up making quite the name for himself among fans. Now, those insurmountable odds I'm talking about obviously include the fact that their captain, Kaname Tosen, betrays them and abandons the Soul Society, effectively just leaving the 9th Division to pick up the pieces. But unlike the vice-captains of the 3rd and the 5th Division, who also suffered the same loss, Hisagi really feels like the one who pulled himself together and kept the division going no matter what. And I really like that. Kubo did a great job of showing Hisagi as being the vice-captain of the 3 of them who displayed the readiness and the worthiness to step up to the plate and fill in the role of interim captain, easily the best of the 3 of them. He seemed to not quite get over the betrayal, but he seemed to be able to put it behind him quickly enough to be able to just bring the division back together, keep morale high, and ensure that the 9th Division worked as intended, especially important seeing as they have quite the major official duties to attend to. And so in that regard, it's weird because I feel like Hisagi has always kind of propped this division up in terms of popularity with the Bleach community, despite it not really having a major role to play. Kensei and Tosen have never been the most popular captains ever, so really it has all come down to Hisagi, who really comes into his own around the fake Karakura town. That being said, even if it's not the most popular division of them all, I've always found the character drama triangle of Tosen, Hisagi, and Komamura to be easily one of the most compelling and well-written in the series, and as you guys know by now, it results in one of my favourite fights in all of Bleach. So when I said earlier that the 9th Division feels like the heart and soul of the Gotei 13, in many ways Hisagi Shuhei feels like the beating heart of the 9th Division. He really keeps the fires burning. In many ways, I think the 9th Division is honestly really well-rounded and has quite a lot of interesting things to say. And while they might not be one of the most important plot-wise, they remain a steadfast foundation of the Gotei 13 as a whole. So looking at a general overview of the 9th Division then, like I said, this division actually plays a fairly important role within the ecosystem of the Seireitei. They have 2 major official duties to call their own. The first is pretty simple. They're in charge of Seireitei security, essentially. They're kind of like a patrolling, policing division, and that really fits very well with Kensei's strict sergeant-style attitude, so it makes a lot of sense that he'd be able to pick the absolute best to defend Soul Society on the front lines. Charged with security and investigations, the 9th Division then plays a really unique role within the world of the Seireitei and of the wider Soul Society as well, basically making sure the entire place remains an impenetrable fortress, and I think that's honestly really cool, and as if to display this in a visual sense, outside of very slight exceptions like Mashido herself, the entirety of the 9th Division wears sleeveless shihakusho, which I think is a really awesome, unique piece of visual flair. Their role in charge of investigations is most shown in Turn Back the Pendulum, which of course we'll get into a bit later, but it is really cool seeing the 9th Division taking charge in that scenario and diving headfirst, essentially, into a really bad situation to try and figure out exactly what is going on. I like that investigative style of them, and that also carries over to their second official duty as well. And this official duty is a little more interesting, I think, as it's a bit more off the wall, and perhaps not something you would expect, but the 9th Division is directly in charge of the Seireitei Communication magazine, otherwise known as the Seireitei Bulletin. The editing headquarters of the Bulletin are a part of the 9th Division barracks, and the leader, in quotes, of the 9th Division at any point in time is automatically appointed the editor-in-chief of the magazine as well. So the magazine is deeply entrenched into the history of the 9th Division. The publication of the magazine is a part of the 9th Division's official duties, and it has been in circulation for over 1,000 years. It remains an important part of Soul Society life. Yamamoto even said that the magazine was founded as a way to increase solidarity between Shinigami and try and boost the morale of Shinigami in general. So the 9th Division has a pretty important part to play in kind of everyday upkeep of the Seireitei and the lives of the Shinigami occupying it. In fact, a number of high-ranking Shinigami are in fact regular contributors to the magazine itself, with characters like Renji, Hitsugaya, Komamura, Soifon, Ukitake, and Kyoraku, as well as even the traitorous captains Aizen, Gin, and Tosen being writers. After the defection of Tosen, Hisagi becomes the editor-in-chief of the magazine, and this is just a perfect visualization of the amount of work that he takes on, the amount of stress that he takes on, but he handles it with aplomb. He manages to really keep everything going despite the obvious amount of newfound pressure he is feeling. And I really think that Hisagi embodies the perfect vice captain in many ways, with the way he just almost single-handedly takes on all of the extra work that he is suddenly given. So closely affiliated to the magazine is the 9th Division that Hisagi has even called themselves the publishing house of the Soul Society. And due to being so closely intertwined with the magazine, the 9th Division is often seen as being an artistic, cultural, and curious division as well. And I think that works for Hisagi, but I would never have thought that looking at Kensei. Honestly, a character like Rose feels like he would be better suited to the captaincy of this division. That being said, Tosen always struck me as something of a pensive and thoughtful being, so maybe he makes a little more sense there. The 9th Division's insignia is the white poppy, which symbolises remembrance and peace, specifically remembrance of victims who died in battle. In general, the white poppy symbolises rest, peaceful sleep, and deep slumber, and because of this affiliation, it's often used on grave sites. In fact, quite bluntly, the insignia represents oblivion itself, which I think goes really well with those themes of death and sleep, and actually opens up some really interesting discourse surrounding the 9th Division. Strip back everything else, and the 9th Division feels like perhaps the closest representation of what it actually means to be a Shinigami, to be a god of death. There is a real theme of fear surrounding the 9th Division, specifically when Tosen is in charge, and Hisagi obviously embodies that incredibly well, and I think he does embody at its very core, this ideal of what it means to be a god of death, somebody who controls both life and death, as he even says himself that his Zanpakuto Kazashini looks like it was made to reap lives, and it is literally in the shape of a scythe. You know, he quite embodies a almost traditional Western idea of a Grim Reaper. And the official division colour is Tenny, which is like a shade of orange or light brown, and it's most generally associated with ambition and a drive for success. And I really do feel this in the 9th Division. Of course, Tosen has a sort of dark ambition to grow more powerful, to escape the confines of a regular Shinigami, and as he says himself, he's afraid of dying assimilated as one of them, and so he has grand ambitions to follow Aizen through to the conclusion of his sinister plans. But I think in a more lighter way, that ambition, that drive for success is really showcased in Hisagi as well, as he really does push himself, as we've discussed already, to keep the division going, to keep it afloat after it really does suffer massive losses. And now for the division's role in the story of Bleach. Like I mentioned earlier, they don't necessarily play a pivotal part in any of the major overarching plot lines, but they are always there as a general constant, and they do get several awesome moments, including, as I mentioned, that fantastic character drama triangle between Tosen, Hisagi, and Komamura. As it is with so many other divisions in the Gotei 13, the first time we see the 9th Division chronologically is 110 years prior to the main storyline as part of the Turn Back the Pendulum mini-arc. Now, the 9th Division actually has a decent-sized role to play here. As I mentioned earlier, they're in charge of investigations, and so it's kind of down to them to be the first responders onto the front line to try and work out what is going on with the central mystery of the mini-arc. Kensei, as the captain, does get a slight introduction a little bit earlier on when Kisuke Urahara is inaugurated as the new 12th Division captain, but it's not until about halfway through Turn Back the Pendulum that Kensei and his vice-captain Mashiro get properly introduced. When people start disappearing all over Rukongai, Kensei and his Muguruma Commando unit, which is a special squad of the kind of upper echelon of the 9th Division who all wear these special white coats, is sent out to try and figure out exactly what is going on. And when they discover that Shinigami victims are now being reported as well, they set up essentially a stakeout to try and work out who the culprit is and lure them out if possible. And it's also out here in the middle of the Rukongai where Kensei first meets a very young Hisagi Shuhei, saves his life from a massive hollow, and imprints upon him an inspiration that would drive Hisagi to join the Gotei 13 and even tattoo his face with the same 69 tattoo that Kensei bears on his chest. The 69, by the way, representing the 6 in his surname Muguruma, and 9 for the 9th Division. It's really cool to see this policing patrolling unit actually set up a stakeout. They have a little tent and everything, they keep guard, they take turns watching. It's really awesome, but there is a sinister vibe in the air. And unfortunately for Kensei, he doesn't realise that one of his own men is one of the principal culprits behind the disappearances. Unfortunately for him, his current 5th seat is none other than Kaname Tosen himself, and Tosen uses his Bankai to take out all of his comrades before stabbing Kensei literally in the back. When the other captains and vice-captains arrive on the scene to respond to their disappearance, Kensei is revealed to have fully hollow-fied as part of Aizen's experiments. He is the first Shinigami we see turned into a truly monstrous hollow, the first of them to actually be hollow-fied. He has a great design, and there's a crazy fight that breaks out where everyone tries to stop him as he seems to have lost himself to the hollow within. This insanity is bubbling and erupting from him. And then, of course, as it looks like they might be able to gain the upper hand, Mashiro arrives as well, having also been hollow-fied, and takes them out. And eventually all of these people fall victim to Aizen, Gin, and Tosen's plans, but are eventually helped out of the Soul Society by Kisuke Yoroichi and Tessai and effectively exiled. So Kensei and Mashiro are now out of the Soul Society, living in secret in the human world, but because of Tosen's betrayal, effectively the entire upper management of the 9th Division has been utterly decimated. The Muguruma Commando unit was made up of Kensei, Mashiro, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th seats of the 9th Division, and now all of those people are either dead or gone, leaving, of course, only one man to take up the reins of the division, Kaname Tosen. So presumably, being now the most senior man in the 9th Division, I guess he probably took up the captaincy pretty quickly after Kensei was gone. You do have to wonder if no one thought it was suspicious that only the 5th seat managed to escape apparently almost totally unharmed, but presumably he gets away with it anyway since we know he becomes the captain. So having effectively usurped the captaincy from Kensei, Tosen is now in charge of the 9th Division. And we get a couple of little snippets of his captaincy before the Soul Society arc begins. We get to see him at some point in the past witnessing the arrival and promotion of Zaraki Kenpachi to the captaincy of the 11th Division after he kills Kenpachi Kiganjo. Then after this we get at some point in the future into Tosen's captaincy as well. 20 years prior to the main storyline, we see Tosen obviously still the captain of the 9th Division, still experimenting on hollows with Aizen and Gin, and they watch as Captain Ishin Shiba of the 10th Division battles their most sophisticated hybrid yet, White, and as White self-destructs and seemingly is a total failure after coming into contact with Masaki Kurosaki, Tosen is enraged by this. He's incredibly upset that their supposed best hybrid yet that they put so much work and effort into creating has failed. But Aizen is a little more optimistic and instead curious to see what happens next. And then even further into the future than that, we see he travels to Waco Mundo with Aizen and Gin and helps Aizen conquer it from underneath Baragon's nose. So kicking off the Soul Society arc, like I said, the 9th Division doesn't play a massive role here, and it's honestly kind of weird to return to a time where Hisagi was almost an absolute nobody here, Kubo choosing instead to focus on other vice-captains at the time. Tosen is present at the initial captains meeting and then visits Aizen's corpse along with Komamura and Unohana, where she basically says that it's the real deal and that Aizen is dead. After this, Tosen meets up with Hisagi and decides that he's going to enter the battlefield, after which he ends up meeting Uryu Ishida and incapacitating him immediately with his Shikai Suzumushi in a really awesome, inverted sort of negative page, which looks really, really cool, and unfortunately we never see again, really. And Tosen and the 9th Division are very much on the side of the Soul Society during the escalating civil war that breaks out during the Soul Society arc. Tosen joins up with Komamura, somebody who at least believes their visions align, they walk the same path, and the two of them end up confronting Kenpachi Zaraki, who has allied himself with the Ryoka. Hisagi ends up taking Yumachika, and the two of them go somewhere else to have their fight, while Tosen and Komamura battle Kenpachi. And it's a pretty awesome battle. Tosen is the one who really fights the most here. It's really more his battle than it is Komamura. Tosen deals some serious damage to Kenpachi with moves like Benehiko, but seeing Kenpachi almost totally unfazed by this forces Tosen to activate his Bankai. From afar, Hisagi has already effectively defeated Yumachika and sees Tosen activating Bankai and proceeds to go to try and help him, but Yumachika stops him from leaving and instead reveals the secret of his true Zanpakuto, a mystery that wouldn't be followed up from until the Fate Karakura Town arc. Eventually, Tosen is defeated by Zaraki, his Bankai shatters, and Komamura saves his life, exposing his identity in the process. Meanwhile, Hisagi has suddenly and very quickly apparently been defeated by Yumachika after the reveal of his true Zanpakuto. And then suddenly Hisagi hears the truth, that Tosen is a traitor and has betrayed both the 9th Division and the Soul Society on the whole. Tosen, now revealed to be one of the close conspirators of Aizen, who has also just been revealed to be alive, kidnaps Renji and Rukia and takes them to Sokyoku Hill. Hisagi heads to Sokyoku along with everybody else and personally apprehends Tosen, but Tosen escapes using Nigathion. It's after this where we get some really nice moments for Hisagi as he obviously realises he's going to have to step up to the plate a little bit, but really, perhaps feeling a little bit lost and unsure of what to do, he visits the grave of Tosen's departed friend, where he finds Komamura standing there already, and we get one of my favourite moments, really, of this arc, where Hisagi, perhaps unsure, asks Komamura, "Do you ever think Captain Tosen will come back?" To which Komamura replies, "Absolutely, together we'll open his eyes." And it's such a good moment and the start of that really fantastic character triangle. But as if to drown his sorrows, Hisagi eventually leaves and meets up with Rangiku and Izuru for a drinking party. By the start of the Arrancar arc, Hisagi still hasn't really slipped into the popularity that he would gain a bit later on. He meets up with Ukitake as Ukitake watches over Rukia training with Orihime. Hisagi hands him a copy of the Seireitei Communication and basically talks about how much work he's had to take on now that Tosen is gone, because Tosen never delegated anything to them before, and how it's all kind of fallen on his shoulders, but he's taking it in his stride and with good humour, and that's really cool to see. But of course, when the Fate Karakura Town arc rolls around, this is Hisagi's crowning moment. This is where he really stands out and became effectively a fan favourite. Hisagi is one of the 4 guardians of the 4 pillars holding the Fate Karakura Town in place, and as one of the earliest battles of that war, he fights and kills Baragon's Fraction Findor Clarius. The reveal of Hisagi's Shikai Kazushini in this battle was one of the things that really propelled him to stardom within the community, essentially, as the Shikai is really awesome, but on top of that, Hisagi's mantra about fear, the way he lives his life, the way he conducts himself was something that really struck a chord with fans and basically made him immensely popular. It helped a lot as well that this fight was absolutely stupendous in the anime. Later, when Aion is rampaging through the battlefield, taking out Matsumoto, taking out Hinamori, Hisagi eventually arrives on the scene with Izuru to save them. And after a short scuffle where Hisagi seemingly downs Aion, he is bested by the monstrous Chimera and nearly killed, his shattered body eventually just tossed aside. But later on, he witnesses the arrival of the Vizard, opening his eyes just enough to see Kensei Muguruma arriving on the battlefield. But after this, we get the culmination of the brilliance that is the Tosen, Hisagi, and Komamura storyline. As Tosen and Komamura begin to lock blades and prepare to fight, suddenly a chain wraps itself around Tosen's blade, and Hisagi intervenes. Panting, barely able to stand, he's still injured, his wounds haven't been healed entirely, but Hisagi knows he has to be involved in this fight no matter what goes down. And although Tosen chastises him for not having any fear in his voice, basically implying that Tosen's going to be able to defeat him, Hisagi readies to fight nonetheless. And it's an absolutely fantastic battle that I really do want to go into greater detail in a little bit later on. But it's just so very well done. Hisagi looks on in absolute horror as Tosen reveals the depths of his depravity, having acquired hollow powers, at which point Tosen nearly wipes out Hisagi in a single hit, but Hisagi hasn't gone down so easily, utilising training given to him by Tosen himself to instinctively take a half step back, allowing him to wrap his chain around Tosen's neck and bring him crashing down to the ground. There's a real nice heart-to-heart here where Hisagi questions what's happened to Tosen's values and how he can turn his back on the very words he gave his former vice-captain about how, as long as you wield your blade with fear, as long as you fear your own power, you have the right to use it, and that those that don't fear their own strength have no right to wield their own blade. And Hisagi says, what do you fear anymore? What happened to your fear? Where has it gone? But Tosen just callously stabs him in the gut and kicks him from the edge of the building, presumably taking him out of the fight. Except he hasn't. Of course, when Tosen is moments away from finishing off Komamura and ending the battle, Hisagi leaps out of nowhere, lands on Tosen's head, and stabs him. It's a brutal moment, stabbing Tosen through the top of the head, activating his Shikai so the scythe blade comes out of Tosen's mouth and the other one goes into the back of his head. It's brutal, it's gruesome, but it's also artistic and incredibly well done. It's a fantastic end to the battle. You can see the pain etched into Hisagi's face, but in my opinion, this is the ultimate moment where he surpasses his former captain. He's already shown a willingness and a drive to take on Tosen's former tasks, to take on everything the 9th Division needed once it fell into disrepair. And now, Hisagi has actually killed his former captain who has completely lost his way. And it's a beautiful moment. It's really well done. There's a nice moment between the two of them where as Tosen is dying, he says he wants to finally see Hisagi's face with his own eyes, but of course his body ruptures and explodes, utterly horrifying Hisagi. And really that's it for Hisagi in the Fate Karakura Town. We see him briefly looking exasperated with glee at the idea that Aizen might have been defeated, even though of course it's an illusion. But that's pretty much it for the vice-captain of the 9th Division in this arc. Once the war ends, Matsumoto notes that Hisagi and Renji have gone off training together, and they are both moving forward from the events of the battle. And it really was the Fate Karakura Town that made Hisagi so very popular with fans, and it's honestly not hard to see why. From his sterling battle and standout moment against Findor, where he reveals his Shikai in probably one of the most awesome ways possible, having a great fight against this enemy, to his emotional battle with Tosen, where he brought down one of the biggest antagonists of the arc, and it all just felt so very well crafted and well earned. The 9th Division plays a very small role in the Lost Agent arc, being one of the divisions that doesn't go to see Ichigo in the living world and therefore has to wait until a bit later on to be showcased. In the human world, Renji mentions that Hisagi brought a motorbike to the Soul Society, which is quite funny. Apparently he got seriously told off for causing a major ruckus. But the biggest part that the 9th Division plays in this arc is when Ichigo returns to Soul Society and discovers that Kensei Muguruma has taken up his position as captain once again, heralding that at least some of the Vizards have in fact returned to their posts in the Gotei. And so we come to the 1000-year Blood War arc, and I have to warn you from the off, this arc is not kind to the 9th Division. Really not kind to them. Like, they are certainly one of the divisions that gets beaten down the absolute most, I would argue. They pretty much don't get a single moment to shine, I think that's fair to say. Even Hisagi, whose popularity astounded Kubo himself, is treated so badly in this arc that he is just thrown around like a rag doll from start to finish. But let's get into it and break down exactly what happens during the ultimate war of Bleach. So Kensei and Hisagi are present in their respective captains and vice-captains meetings at the start of the arc, where they discuss the strange events that are unfolding, the incursions into Soul Society and the disappearance of Hollows and residents of Rukongai. Later, Soul Society comes under attack in the first Quincy invasion, and the 9th Division is attacked by Sternritter O, the overkill Driscoll Bursey, who goes after Hisagi, and Hisagi just gets totally wrecked by this guy, slammed into a wall, at which point Driscoll moves to kill him in the exact same way that he killed Chojuro, launching a massive lance at Hisagi, aiming to finish him off, but Hisagi is luckily saved by Yamamoto, who kills Driscoll, before going off to face Yhwach himself. We get a really nice moment for Kensei after the first invasion, where he's gathered with the other captains who are mourning Yamamoto's death, and he scolds Soifon for embarrassing herself during the ceremony, but she snaps back at him, saying that he just doesn't care about Yamamoto after what happened between them 100 years ago, which reasonably sets Kensei off, but of course Komomura and then Kyoraku end up intervening. And then much later, during the down period between invasions, the brief moment of peace, Kensei calls Hisagi out to Rukongai, where he says that he is going to need to learn Bankai pretty quickly in case Kensei's Bankai is stolen in the next battle. It's a cool moment, it's a cool plot thread that Kubo was setting up. It's just a shame that Hisagi's Bankai is never shown off in the manga itself. Now, of course, that's what we have Can't Fear Your Own World for, but it definitely feels like Kubo either forgot about this plotline or just kind of dropped it weirdly, because it does come back later on in a really strange fashion. But during this early training moment, Hisagi says that, he can't learn Bankai that fast, but Kensei summons Mashiro to his side in order to train Hisagi. And Mashiro's involvement here is really strange, in my opinion. She's wearing a Shinigami Shihakusho, she mentions that she is now the super vice-captain of the 9th Division with her own badge and everything. Now, I have a hard time believing that's an official position, because the Central 46 threw a fit about Kyoraku taking on a second vice-captain as well, but maybe it is. Maybe once Kyoraku was allowed to, everyone was allowed to do that, and so Kensei decided to do that. But it's also weird that Mashiro is the only Shinigami Vizard, the only person who's apparently a part of the Gotei 13 to ever actually use her Hollow Mask in the 1000-year Blood War arc. And then she's also never seen again. So this character is handled really weirdly here, but she punches Hisagi in the gut, and Kensei basically says that if you don't train to learn your Bankai, Mashiro will kill you. And then there's a moment that I've kind of complained about before, where Kensei says that I'm not as soft as Tosen, and Hisagi rebuffs him, saying that, I respect you, I've always respected you, but you have no right to badmouth Captain Tosen, which I've always just thought was super weird. Maybe Hisagi doesn't know that Kensei was betrayed and stabbed in the back by Tosen and literally ruined his life and kicked him out of Soul Society, but either way, I always thought that was a little bit weird, but it's still a nice moment between these two characters. And I always appreciated that Kubo did do a decent job of showing us the new relationship between Kensei and Hisagi, much like he did with Shinji and Momo, and Rose and Kira really could have done with some of that as well. During the second invasion of the Vandenreich, Hisagi manages to sneak around the battlefield at nighttime really without being spotted, leaps over a wall, and ends up bumping into Ikkaku and Yu Michika. The three of them decide to sort of stick together, but they are quickly ambushed by Sternritter S, the superstar masked masculine, who defeats them all, but Hisagi is the only only one who's able to regain consciousness briefly enough to wrap the chain of Kazushini around Mask's leg to prevent him from leaving. Of course, this only results in further beatdowns for Hisagi as Mask pulls him out, clotheslines him in the face, pretty much knocking him out immediately, and then goes to kill him by crushing his head underneath his boot like some kind of like bursting a melon or something like that. But of course, luckily for Hisagi, Kensei arrives to save the day with a pretty badass introduction, to be fair, where Kensei just puts his foot underneath Mask's and stops him from moving any further. Kensei, along with Rose, then beats up Master Masculine seemingly pretty easily, but Hisagi wakes up to warn Kensei that they have to take out James first, who is Mask's little fan, essentially. He's his cheering supporter. And since Mask is able to get more power, he ends up turning the tables on Kensei and beating him up pretty badly as well. Although Kensei gains a slight upper hand, at one point Mask eventually breaks his arm and fully knocks him out. Rukia arrives and ends up taking the bodies of Kensei and Rose to Isane Kotetsu for healing, but under Isane's care, Kensei and Rose are killed by Sternritter V, the visionary Gremi Thamo, and their bodies eventually topple off the side of the platform he creates to battle Zaraki on. So you can already see that the 9th Division really can't be cut a break at this point. A little bit later on, Hisagi, I guess being healed at some point later, confronts the Sternritter along with Ikkaku, Yumichika, Byakuya, Renji and Rukia in order to prevent them from reaching Ichigo, and a massive battle royale breaks out, but very quickly the explosion, the force of pressure caused by Yhwach Arc escaping the Soul Society, forces them all apart and into individual battles. During Mayuri Kurotsuchi's battle against Sternritter Zed the zombie Giselle, she reveals that she has zombified Kensei and Rose, again somehow finding their bodies. I thought they were in the care of Isane, but clearly she wasn't doing a great job of that, and Kensei fights Mayuri's Arrancar soldiers and loses to them after being affected by the blood that's splashing all over him, allowing Mayuri to take control of the zombified Kensei. Kensei then stabs Giselle in the chest, and that's apparently the end of that fight. Meanwhile, Hisagi meets up with Byakuya after apparently defeating a Sternritter, but the truth of the matter is that he has fallen in love. He has been placed under Pepe Wakabrada's spell and begins battling Byakuya. Byakuya knocks him down, but Hisagi continues to get back up, even wielding Senbon Zakura against Byakuya himself. However, Kensei arrives, still working for Mayuri, and he puts Hisagi down after the entranced Hisagi tries to attack him. And now we're at the stage where the 9th Division is being treated so badly that they're effectively trying to kill each other. And Hisagi just cannot catch a break in this arc, constantly being beaten up in almost every scene he is in. The zombified Kensei helps to defeat Pepe, however, but it's just a shame that Kubo chose to go this route with these characters. I appreciate that there needs to be consequences, I guess, for these characters losing, but I don't think anyone would have been upset to have seen Kensei and Rose reverted back to their normal selves already for this, and actually having some agency and some dialogue in these fight scenes, rather than just being masqueraded around as somebody else's puppets. Later on, once the second invasion is almost over, Hisagi joins the rest of the Shinigami in their stronghold where he was being healed, and then he tries to help them generate enough Reiatsu to build a gate to the Soul King's palace. At one point, Yhwach Arc, after absorbing the Soul King, sends a torrent of its Reiatsu down to the Soul Society, and Hisagi, using Kazushini, tries to fight it off, but is quickly overwhelmed. However, Hisagi does end up travelling with everybody else up to the royal palace, but the extent of his injuries means he begins to lag behind, and as one final insult to this character, he falls behind the rest of them and is sniped by Lil Barrow from afar, taking him out of the fight. Once the war is over, Kensei has been restored to his normal self, and as he and Hisagi head to the new captain's inauguration, they meet up with the 10th Division, and everybody just comes together to mock Hisagi for not revealing his Bankai, which again is really weird, but maybe by this point Kubo had an idea that somebody else was going to reveal it anyway, so he thought he could include this rather strange little tease right at the end here. And then in the Hell Arc, we see Kensei briefly joining the rest of the captains in front of Ukitake's grave for the ceremony that would inadvertently send Ukitake to hell. Meanwhile, Hisagi goes with the rest of the vice captains to Karakura town in order to kill the hollows they need for the ceremony, only to end up fighting off hell hollows after Kiyone is wounded. And that's basically it for the 9th Division in their entirety. Like I said, they're a really cool, unique and interesting division with some really intriguing parts to them. I love the fact that they are in charge of the Seireitei Bulletin. That's honestly possibly my favourite thing about them. It makes them really unique and really helps them to stand out. They never play a major role in the series, but as you've seen in their role in Bleach, they normally always have something to do, but they are treated exceedingly poorly in the Thousand Year Blood War. They are a real casualty of that arc for sure. But that's it for the video, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the 9th Division. Do you enjoy them? Do you like the characters? Who is your favourite 9th Division character of them all? I'd love to hear it. Do please let me know in the comments below. And let me know as well what your favourite 9th Division moment is. Guys, don't forget to hit subscribe. But until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.